That was the last thing that crossed my mind in the summer of 2001. Like everyone else, I thought it was a Cessna. But how convinced were you that this was going to happen?
I was completely convinced. In fact, in the full clip that's online, you can find it on Twitter and other places, it has been removed. I explained to people that they need to call the White House and tell the White House, we know if you allow these attacks, that you're basically allowing it to happen. And it was similar to all the data we had when
you said that on your show?
On my show. And I gave the number out so people could actually call the White House. And then going back to October of last year, when the Russians went into Ukraine, I specifically said I think they'll go in by the end of February. And there was a lot of data that went into that. And then they specifically did go in on February 24th. And so I was able to make that prediction as well. But there was a lot of data and information that went into it.
Sure. I'm just, for the record, I miscalled that completely. I didn't think they were going to do it. You were right. I was wrong, not for the first time. But the 9/11 thing, I remember that really well. Nobody was thinking like that. So you called it in public on tape. Did the 9/11 Commission, so if I'm the FBI and I'm investigating 9/11, you're like the first guy I would call because you're the only person who said that out loud. Did they call you?
No, they didn't. But my most accurate prediction, going back over a decade, was when I read the Rockefeller Foundation Operation Lockstep, and they described using a virus to bring in world government, to bring in a world medical ID, that they would then build the social credit score off of, and that they would make people wear masks for fear, and that they would shut down sporting events and things like that, and basically phase in this new tyranny. So I was also able to specifically make that prediction over and over and over again because I was going off their own battle plans.
Are you the only person in media who actually reads these reports?
I don't think a lot of people do read them, but I do read them. I mean, I'm currently reading MIT reports from their top counsels, Pentagon reports. They have a working group called the Mad Scientist Group at the Pentagon that works with MIT. And if you go watch their hour-long, 2-hour-long, 3-hour-long meetings they have on YouTube with all the tops, I mean, we're talking hundreds of top scientists, they admit that they're building a post-human world, that soon everyone's going to be mind controlled, that they're going to put smart dust in our food that they can electromagnetically control, and they just lay it all out right there. And I've learned what these people said in the 50s they would do were done by the 70s. What they said their plan was in the 70s for the 90s, they got done. And then when they had their Agenda 21 in Rio de Janeiro in 1992, the big UN summit, they described everything they would do up until the year 2000, and they got almost all of that done. And now they've got Agenda 2030, and we're going to ban your gas stoves, we're going to ban beef, we're going to ban single-family dwellings, we're going to ban private ownership of cars, we're going to do all this, and now you see them rolling it all out. So I'm not really making predictions in these high-level World Economic Forum and other large think tank groups. They are laying out the future, and their high priest of the World Economic Forum, that's a consortium of all these groups, Yuval Noah Harari, you can read his quotes, the future's not human. The human era is over. The public is useless. I mean, this is a very anti-human system, so that's how I'm able to make predictions, because they've given us a roadmap. They tell us where they want to take us. And so when the public wakes up, we push back on some of it, but they always come back. And so I'm just following the trajectory of where they say they want to take us. And there were a lot of white papers, not just the PNAC document from 2000, a year before 9/11, where they describe we really need big terror attacks. We really need Pearl Harbor events to get Americans to give up their rights. I mean, take what just happened in Israel, totally tragic. My heart goes out to all that have been killed or lost loved ones or been injured. But there's no way that one of the best intelligence agencies in the world didn't know that was coming. The massive buildup, the 5,000 missiles, the paragliding attacks, all of that. And so there was clearly a stand down there. And now the West will take more of the people's rights. Israel will be able to crack down and take more of their people's rights, which is a big debate over there. Hamas is being funded by Hezbollah, which is Iran. We just had Biden a month ago give $6 billion to Iran. And now the mullahs are bragging that they were behind the attack, Hezbollah funding Hamas. So really, those aren't even predictions. It's clear that Hezbollah and Hamas have tens of thousands of men and women as sleeper cells that are, quote, other than Mexican, that the Border Patrol list every month tens of thousands coming across the Texas and Arizona and California sectors. And it's an easy equation to predict that there's a wide probability that Hezbollah and Hamas at some point are going to attack sports stadiums, they're going to attack colleges, they're going to attack synagogues, they're going to shoot up mass gatherings if they're given the order by Iran, if we go to war with Iran. And then when this happens, our government won't get in trouble for dissolving the border and letting these people come in. Just like on 9/11, our government clearly had prior knowledge. There was clearly a major stand down that went on, and the government got more power, more control, and now they're not pointing the Homeland Security apparatus at the Russians like they did in the Cold War, or the Islamists after 9/11. Now they admit that their main focus is Christian conservatives and the bitter clingers and the people that live in rural America, that quote, white people, I mean, it says that in the report, are the main terror threat. And so this whole apparatus of the war on terror it has now been turned inwardly against the people, not just here, but also in Europe, where if someone criticizes transgenderism in the UK, they come to their house and arrest them. If a journalist does that, they come to their house and arrest them. If somebody says, I think these surveillance cameras should start getting cut down, they come to their house and they arrest them for their free speech. And so this is a global movement by the mega corporations, by the BlackRocks and the State Streets and the Vanguards that control 80+% of world wealth to control our behavior. And Larry Fink of BlackRock has said that at the Davos Group repeatedly. We're going to use our control over all this finance and this global social credit score we're rolling out to control people's behavior. So that's really what this is. And then they use the threat of global warming, they use the threat of a virus, they use the threat of radical Islam to take our rights, but we really are the target.
Even if by the way, none of that seems implausible at this point. I mean, just you're a measure of how the world has changed. If you'd said this to me 15 years ago, I'd have been like, someone's a crackpot and it's not me. And now after COVID, nothing you said seems crazy at all. I mean, you may be right, you may be wrong, but it's not out of the realm of possibility, obviously. But even if I disagree with what you just said, I would think that's pretty interesting. It's an interesting perspective. Why do you think, you've committed no crime, you'd be in jail if you had. Why do you think they hate you so much?
Because I do read their documents and I do read their books, and we were effectively getting a lot of people in the military and the intelligence agencies who were compartmentalized and who tuned into my show and saw my films and read my books and things, and they clicked with it and said, wow, I see all this going on around me. He's not lying about it. And then I would give them other pieces that I discovered or my other guests discovered. And so it was giving them an operational awareness outside of their compartmentalization. And so we had massive success in the military, in the police, and in the intelligence agencies, not just here, but around the world. And so our penetration into those areas to help people expand their awareness that we're inside the government, inside corporations, was triggering a lot of whistleblowers, was triggering a lot of people not going along with the program. And so really my sin was decompartmentalization of the population.
When you got deplatformed, and to this day, no one has ever been more aggressively censored, I don't think, than you. I've apologized to you this in person before. I was in Labrador on a fishing trip and missed the entire thing. I was literally out of cell range. I didn't know what happened, but I got back and I read about it. I felt like it was a major moment in the history of the American media. I don't think anybody defended you when that happened. Anybody with any kind of audience.
For me, when Tim Cook admitted that he met on the weekend in August of 2017 with the other big tech heads, and they made the decision to curate, like it's a museum, and take me off. It was hundreds of platforms. I mean, it wasn't just all the big ones. It was everything from LinkedIn to our bank accounts being taken away to everything ensuing that week and over the next month. And I knew that I was a test case, and I wasn't taken off those platforms for any demonstrable reason. It was the questioning the school shooting thing that came later. They went and kind of dredged that up from my past, just questioning it a few times, blew that up after I'd been deplatformed, and said I was deplatformed for that. But if you check the record, I wasn't. And so once they deplatformed me, it made the show in ways only get bigger, with people actually going to Infowars.com and finding me on local radio stations and things. So then they panicked and said, okay, let's look at his record and create more of a reason that he's being taken off. So they took things out of context from 5-6 years before, blew them up as a current thing out of context, and deceptively reported on what I'd said to create a straw man argument to then facilitate the reason.
What's so crazy is if you asked just a cross section of Americans who's responsible for the Sandy Hook massacre of kids at the school, no one remembers the name of the murderer.
Adam Lanza.
Okay, thank you. I didn't remember. Alex Jones. They effectively blamed you for a school shooting that you were not present at.
I have people come up to me in the parking lot. You can ask my security guy. He's been there when people walk up and go, "Why'd you kill those kids?" And then you go, "I didn't kill those kids." And they go, "Yeah, you did." And so that is what this has turned into. And this is bigger than me. I want people to understand something, that the mullahs in Iran and the Ayatollah are congratulating Hamas that just killed around 1,000 or more innocent Israelis, many of them women, children, disabled people, in a vicious, evil sneak attack. They are on there. Hezbollah and Hamas, mainly Hamas, but it's Hezbollah funding it out of Iran, are literally posting videos of them cutting people's heads off and killing children and massacring innocent people. They're allowed to have their Hezbollah accounts and their Hamas accounts. The Ayatollah is able to congratulate what these people have done, and I am still banned. And I'm not mad at Elon Musk. I understand I've been so demonized with the general public. He's barely able to, keep Twitter going right now. I really appreciate what he's done. I admire him. I think he's done a lot of great work, and I see him moving in the right direction. So a lot of people attack Musk on Twitter. I trend all the time. Hey, if you're such an absolutist on free speech, bring back Alex Jones. I understand that if he did that, the ADL and others would really be able to probably shut down Twitter. So I understand that he needs to go through a process before he does that. So people get mad at Twitter for not.
Why the ADL? I'm not the world's expert on your career, but I know you. I've never heard you say a single anti-Semitic thing and an anti-Israel thing. Why would the ADL be against you? I don't think anyone's even called you an anti-Semite.
Well,
unless I'm missing something.
I mean, what goes on is the left forever called everybody a racist if you were just a conservative or pro-Second Amendment or pro-life or thought we ought to have a border. And that didn't work anymore to call people racist. And so the ADL gets all this big liberal donations. And so they go out and then police and take people's sponsors and target them just by the ADL calling up sponsors. Sponsors get scared and drop. And so that's what they've done to Elon Musk. They've been, they took over 50% of Twitter's North American and European advertising in just the last year, and bragged about it by saying he gives harbor to white supremacists, which he doesn't. But at the same time, white supremacists are ridiculous. They're goofy. Most of them are usually working for foundations that are basically actors. We're not supposed to say that, but there's many cases of that actually being the case, and that they're just LARPing that they're white supremacists. But let those clowns speak. Whatever happened to the ACLU that used to support the KKK marching through a town or publishing their own newspaper? I don't support the KKK. I think they're a joke. But if you take their rights, you've taken everybody's. But they're not even taking the rights of those people to post because they create fear and they get the ADL more funding. But if they can target an Alex Jones or an Elon Musk or a Tucker Carlson, then they're going after the real populist leaders that are bringing America together. And so what the left wants is to divide us all according to race, and to come out and say fundamentally with critical race theory that inherently being white is bad, and teaching 5-year-old white children that they're inherently bad because they're white. That is wounding their brains and really creating racial division.
Why do people put up with that? I don't understand why. That's just, if you had told me 20 years ago, and I grew up in a world where judging people on the basis of their skin color was totally immoral, and I still believe that. But if you told me 20 years ago that we were going to live in a world where people get on TV and just be like, I hate white people, they're bad. No, it's totally fine. Like, why do people put up with that? Like, there should be zero tolerance for that. I don't get it.
The Democratic Party founded the KKK. And when the majority were whites in the South in some areas, they played the race card for political power. Now that the majority in most areas are not white, they're playing the good old-fashioned race card of tell whites, stand down, let people take over your society, your culture, give up your culture. It's embarrassing to be white. And then now it's flat out bad to be white. And the left's trying to convert all these minority groups that are now the majority in most areas into race-based systems because that is a very effective system.
But why do people put up with that? If they were doing that to Malaysians or Filipinos or Hondurans, I would say you can't do that. You're not allowed to attack people on the basis of their race. I'm sorry, not in a country like this because the country will fall apart, and it's immoral.
I totally agree.
But nobody says anything. I don't get it.
The reason they've done it is most of the enforcers of this are white liberal women, 45 or older, not
Fair.
it's just a fact, and they're cucked husbands. And so to them,
Can I just say that the phrase cucked husbands is the best?
it really is true. So if you get around these white liberals, they live in the whitest areas. They're totally scared of anybody with brown skin, but they virtue signal constantly and then say, yes, the white people are bad. You know, the white people are evil. And, you know, these, I mean, I've even seen white people sit up there and say, yeah, it's time to deal with these crackers. And they're a white person saying that. So
from Jackson Hole or Nantucket or Aspen or Bethesda, the whitest places in America. So shouldn't there be a law? It's super simple. If you've got a BLM sign in your yard, you should be required to live in Gary, Indiana or Baltimore. Like you should not be anywhere near Jackson, Wyoming.
You should be made to live in East St. Louis.
I totally agree.
You should be made to live in Detroit.
Yes.
But of course, they've done the studies, they've looked at the statistics. It's not just here, it's in Europe and it's in the UK, like in London. The liberal areas are like 99% white.
Oh, I noticed.
Okay, and there's a lot of rich people in London that aren't white, but they're not even in that area. They are the most insular group, and then they point at white Christian culture and society that actually outlawed slavery in most of the world, was the vanguard of stopping it, and then they don't point at China, which is the most homogeneous, racist group in the world.
It's an ethno-state. It's Han Chinese, period.
Well, they teach, as you know on their news, that we are going to have Chinese superiority. We are the Chinese supremacist. Xi Jinping admires Hitler. He is literally following a race-based operation that is taking the world over, that owns the majority of Hollywood, that's paid off the Democratic Party. And if you look at all these anti-white shows that you see funded in Hollywood, almost all of it has majority literal communist Chinese government backing that is funding this. So it's real simple. China looks in and sees this diverse culture, and they say, we're going to use that to split the country up and balkanize it. And that's what they've done. And so communist China, along with the Southern Poverty Law Center and the ADL and all these groups, see America's weakness, and they're literally coming in saying white people are inherently bad because of the color of their skin. They inherently have cheated people. They've hurt people. White people invented racism. None of that's true. It's really just tribalism. And then they organize all these other groups into race-based groups to then unify them under the Democratic Party to attack who is left that tends to be more conservative, and that is some white people in this country. Though they're panicking because more and more blacks are voting Republican, more and more Hispanics are voting Republican. They're starting to figure this out. So now they're in panic mode to bring in totally disenfranchised third world populations who are refugees from the multi-year lockdowns in Africa, Latin America, and Asia and the Middle East. They then bring them to UN camps, brainwash them, then bring them to our border, brainwash them more, then send them into the United States, and then literally hold them for years at facilities while they're indoctrinated to be this new political underclass that's then going to be turned loose on America. And that's why you see Democrats giving illegal aliens the right to vote in their cities, giving them driver's license. That's why you see them passing laws. They can be police officers. So they are importing a new enforcement class against the American people. And they're setting it up along racial lines, not us. They're making it racial, just like Hitler made what he did racial. So it's the left and the think tanks and the communist Chinese that look at the U.S. and have seen our weakness as race, and they are exacerbating it.
So I don't understand. So you're from Texas. You grew up in Texas. Your family's been there a long time. Texas is changing really fast. It's dirty, for one thing, I noticed, because physically dirty, garbage on the side of the road. I never have seen that in Texas before. So your governor could have stopped that. He commands the Texas National Guard, and he didn't. And I feel like that makes him a traitor to the country, but what am I missing?
Well, I mean, Governor Abbott is, on a scale of 1 to 10, the best kind of Republican governor is a 10, and the worst is, say, a 1. And like the Illinois, it's a so-called Republican, that's really a Democrat. I would put Greg Abbott as about a 5. The state is overwhelmed. There isn't really a state mechanism. It's federal to kick people back and deport them. So they have put up barbed wire. They have tried to stop people. They have tried, but then they have to hand them over to the feds who release them.
But why not just say the feds are committing a crime? They're committing a crime. This is not allowed under laws passed by the Congress. In a democracy, Congress passed laws. And so you've got criminals running the country. The Biden administration is criminal, which is true. And we're not playing along. And like, if you don't like it, come do something about it. Meanwhile, every able-bodied man with a black rifle assemble at the border, and we're just going to stop this and save the country. I don't understand. Like, that's not hard. What am I missing?
No, I think you're absolutely right. In fact, what the deep state fears would be a coalition of good governors, good attorney generals, giving them the findings and the rulings that they could indeed do that, and then declaring emergencies in the states and having a coalition of the states come in and do this, and then instruct local police and everybody else to not have sanctuary cities. But the problem is, if you're in Texas, every single city, Houston, San Antonio, Austin, Dallas, Fort Worth, are Democrat Party run. And so Texas is almost purple because the California influx and all the other refugees from New York, many of them bring their leftist ideology with them, even though they're fleeing it. Like locusts, they fly to the next field. And so that's really the issue, is that the legislature is somewhat cucked, to use that word again. And I think the governor has been cucked. He certainly went along with lockdowns and masks more than really any other Republican governor. And so I do think Greg Abbott needs to do a better job. But I also wanted to list some of the things that the state is up against. But I'll say this. Austin fired a bunch of police and another third quit. Crime everywhere, homeless everywhere, trash everywhere, ruin the city like everywhere else they are.
You live there?
Absolutely. That's where my family's from. I've been there since high school. But I'm gonna have to leave soon because it's gotten more and more like Los Angeles every day. It's very sad to see it. People fleeing LA, like my friend Joe Rogan, it seems great to him because he went from a really, really bad situation into a bad situation. But if you've been there, you can see the decline. You can see how fast it is, and it's really, 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 really sad. And there are just illegal aliens everywhere, and refugees from the rest of the country all over the place. And you see really the economic decline of most of the mom and pop businesses and things. So the same rot we've seen all over the country. Austin was supposedly this big mecca and it was going to be so great. And now sadly it's falling apart. I mean, Tucker, you know the answer to all this. You do the best job of anybody with a true Americana populist breakdown. The ruling elites of the world, the Black Rocks, the State Streets, they're on record saying they don't want our consumer society. They don't want our capitalist society. It's bad, it's ugly, it's gross. But they're the biggest consumers compared to anybody else in the world. Their quote carbon footprints are thousands of times bigger than the average person. Leonardo DiCaprio or Klaus Schwab literally have carbon footprints thousands of times bigger than the average poor working American, that they're telling you can't have a car or air conditioning. Remember, before Obama left office, he traveled to Latin America, to Africa, and the Middle East. And what did he tell them in speeches? The clips are famous. You can't have a car or air conditioning. The earth will overheat and burn up. While he's telling people that by the year 2017, like Al Gore said, we would have areas flooded on the coastal areas, while he bought a big house in Martha's Vineyard at 1 foot above sea level. And of course, it's still there and it hasn't flooded. I mean, his chef died there, drowned sadly, but no flooding inside the house, just the dead chef. So they're waging war against civilization and society to make us poor, to put us under siege, and to cut off our energy, make the cost of living impossible, to break our old system, to bring in something even worse. And that's the Cloward and Piven strategy that the Democratic Party has adopted. They've done the same thing in Europe. This is a plan. The central banks have unlimited money, but they can't buy all the infrastructure up because people aren't selling. So they've got to crush us and make people so poor that everybody's forced to sell their business, their intellectual property, their physical property, but more importantly, to turn over our bodies to them. We're a UN treaty that Biden right now is, that's what I call Biden, is Biden is trying to ratify, would literally put our bodies under the control of the United Nations and our medical care policy under it. So
it's the pandemic
treaty.
Yeah.
So what this is really a breaking of our will, a demoralization. That's what the transgenderism is, and 2 men can have a baby, and puberty blockers, and castrating little boys, and cutting little girls' breasts off. They've got such hellish stuff coming in this designed global collapse to bring in their world government that they've got to just have all these horrors out there, hoping we just throw up our hands and run off to the countryside, which everybody's doing, and in a way that's good. But at the same time, then they've got full control.
That's totally right.
And they're going to march out of the countryside next and dig us out.
So that's, I mean, you look at the White House press secretary, who can barely speak English, who's one of the stupidest people I've ever seen, and a transparent liar. You wouldn't hire her to run your copy machine. She's the White House press secretary. Why would you do that? And it's not because of her race or who she sleeps with. I think the whole point is she's so obviously repulsive that it makes you feel bad about the country to see her.
I mean, that's it. We're at a beautiful ball. It's prom night. Everybody's dressed great. There's wonderful food, big, delicious punch bowl. And then they say, what can we do? Well, just have Brian Stelter go take a dump right in that.
Yeah.
And then he's there laughing at you. They're all there laughing at you to make you feel small, to make you question reality. Why is everything so ugly? I mean, that's why they tell people, hey, you can be homeless anywhere. You can crap on the street, needles, throw your garbage everywhere. Drug dealers can sell you drugs. We're going to give the homeless all this government funding. Liberal groups come in and farm and milk each homeless person and skim a big cut of the money off the top. It's a crop, but then a cash crop. But then we see that and we think it's all over. There's nothing we can do to demoralize us and make us give up. And even though I'm conscious of this, even though I know this, it's still at a DNA level. I'm like, I got to go to the country. I got to get out of here. I've got to separate myself from this. But then when they release this toxic cultural poisonous gas, they push us out of those areas and they get the main infrastructure to then organize that, cut off the food and supplies to that group they have, and then tell them the reason you're doing bad is not BlackRock and the WF and Bill Gates. It's all those evil people in the countryside. They're all white supremacists and terrorists and racists. Let's go get them. Because the last group they don't control is rural people that are self-sufficient. And so I get going to the countryside, protecting your children. That's the holy grail. The problem is you've got to have 1 foot in each. You got to go back and fight in the city for the infrastructure, for the government. You got to give people hope while also building a backup operation with farming and ranching and self-sufficiency. So that's why the WEF and the UN are coming in Ireland and in areas of Asia and in the Netherlands and saying by 2030, 80% of your cows have got to be dead. And they just banned like 30% this year in the Netherlands. And it didn't matter people were 80% against it in polls. It didn't matter. They sent the military in against the peaceful farmers that were just protesting, just like the peaceful truckers in Canada got brutally attacked. And so they're all WEF globalist alumni that the big banks on record brag. They've penetrated the cabinets, to quote Klaus Schwab. They've put their operatives in to cut off our energy, demoralize us, release the hardened criminals, put the political activists in prison, continue to cut off the resources to make an angrier world. Klaus Schwab says, we're going to make the world collapse. We're going to have everybody turn against each other. We're going to blame the political classes that we own and control. And then when we're done, we'll bring in our new solution. But first, they have to demolish the cultures and societies that we had before with the fentanyl, with the open borders, with the demoralization, and then they bring in their next phase, which is a high-tech, cashless society, robot, drone-controlled nightmare. More than half of the U.S. in their official UN maps that they've had for more than 25 years, that are some of my first films, show half the U.S. off limits to humans. All cars will have to have GPS. Everybody by law will have to have a cell phone at all times. Australia just did this last year, tried to push it through. And that's the admitted global UN standardized plan, where you don't leave your house without a cell phone. Every car is robot kill switch, GPS controlled. California is moving to ban all the, quote, classic cars. That's any car that doesn't have a digital ignition. And they admit it's for control. So if people think things are bad now, the straitjacket, the ball and chain is going on. It's all being militarily run. Our military is great men and women, but at the top, our military has been globalist, trained, New World Order people for at least 30, 40 years. They've got almost every general, every person under their control, and that's why it came out in the UK and Europe and also here in Canada. You pull up the headlines. Defense Department purposely scared public into lockdowns, masking, and taking inoculations. UK headline, British Ministry of Defense secretly brainwashed and terrorized public. Canada, same headline. They even let you know, oh, the military is here to do this. And now, oh, the CIA and Justice Department is there to help surveil the public to stop disinformation. And it turned out, of course, almost all that disinformation was true.
Always.
About everything. So we have to understand, our governments have been seized. The big corporations want to get rid of the American idea. You got 50 acres and your house and a business and a farm, and you can take care of your family, and you're independent. They have to destroy all that because the rest of the world aspires to that. Instead, they want 15-minute cities, central bank digital currencies. They want all of these systems that track and trace everything you do in the social credit scores. And the plan for the rest of the public, we're talking 99%, is 250 square foot coffin apartments, 5G bathing you in them, literally eating bug protein. And I told people 10 years ago they're going to push bugs on the public because I read it in their white papers. Now it's already in grocery stores all over the U.S., all over Europe. They're putting the cricket meal into the food, very toxic.
Undisclosed, yeah.
It's got chitin in it. Yeah, they'll just give it a number. It's got like a code. And you ask again, why would you do that? Because it's all about breaking our will. They don't want people to aspire to open, free societies. Yeah, there's a lot of waste, there's decadence, there's issues, but there's freedom. They want to train us to live on carbon rationing, food rationing, a very dystopic world. You'll own nothing, you'll have nothing, and you'll be happy. Now, these are quotes.
I have to say, I bet there are, I don't know how long into this we are, 30 minutes or something. I bet there are a lot of people watching who are thinking, holy smokes, I can't believe I'm agreeing with Alex Jones. I'm supposed to hate this guy. Like, where's the lie in what you just said? I'm not sucking up, I'm sincere. Like, I'm listening to this, and even myself, I'm thinking, I can't believe I'm nodding along to Alex Jones and being like, you're absolutely right. Like, where are you wrong?
Well, I just hope people realize that we're all under the gun. So many of these leftists believe that because they go along with this, they're going to be given powerful positions in this system. This is a technocracy. There's almost no managers in this. Almost nobody has power in this system except a very small group of technocrats who happen to be transhumanist. And you said something really astute a few weeks ago in a speech you gave, and you've also talked about on your show, that all of this stems from their fear and denial of death.
So one of the things I find so striking about you, having watched you on and off over the years, and this must be a burden for you personally, but your ability to see people at a deeper level or to see things in them that are not obvious to the rest of us. And I want to give a specific example. So there's a guy called Brian Stelter who had the media show on CNN. I first met Brian Stelter when he was a high school student or a first-year college student because he would hang around the show I worked on at the time at CNN. This was 20 years ago at least. And I always thought he was awkward and weird and probably had a super creepy personal life, but I never took him seriously. There's a pretty famous clip, and I want to play it right now, of you critiquing Brian Stelter, and you take him way more seriously than I ever did, and I think you're right to. So this is a pretty famous clip of you on Brian Stelter.
Hell on earth. He wants to run your life. He wants to control every aspect of your life because he knows he is a cowardly, degenerate sack of anti-human trash. I pledge before my Heavenly Father that I will resist them every way I can. These people are the literal demon spawn of the pit of hell. Look at him. And you know what? He is better than you if you keep letting him run your life. He runs your kids. He runs the schools. He runs the banks. This guy, this spirit, this smiling, leering devil that thinks you can't see what he is your enemy. Period. All the narcissistic, devil-worshipping filth. I see you, enemy. I see you, enemy. 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 You are my enemy. And I swear total resistance to you with everything I've got. Disingenuous, fake, false, broke back, twisted, a defiler, a betrayer, a backstabber, a devil. You don't think I don't see you, Stelter? I see you. You understand me? I know what you think of me and my family. I see you right back. You understand that? You understand that, Stelter?
I've only watched that several hundred times. And I laugh every time, but I also, there's something to, if Brian Stelter had absolute power, would you and your family survive? Of course not. You wouldn't. You'd be, of course not, and neither would mine. So there's a lot that's true about what you said. How did you perceive that? The rest of us just made fun of him.
Now, once they started the censorship and deplatforming, remember back then they would deny it. Oh yeah, we're taking people off air, but it's not censorship. Now they admit, no, it's censorship. We're doing this for your own good. So he was really the face of that, and he was working for the head of CNN that was really in charge of it. It later came out. CNN currently is not in charge. They've handed it completely over to the Justice Department to quarterback, as Congress reported a few months ago with the documents. But at the time, Brian Stelter and his mini-me, Oliver Darcy,
His Popeye to Congress,
were going around calling up and harassing my sponsors, taking sponsors away. And they were going around and organizing big tech to take not just myself, but many other people offline. And so he was destroying our free speech. He was taking our sponsors.
But it's crazy. I just want to restate. You are not promoting race hatred. You're against race hatred. You never have promoted that, ever. You're not promoting violence. You've never called for violence. And you've never even called for breaking the law.
And so that's why there's so much anger there, because I remember the day I did that and a few other clips that went viral. I showed all the stuff he was doing, but then the media attacked me and just clicked it out of context, but still it reverberated with people because people were sick of the corporate legacy media. So people say, well, why is he so angry? Well, it's because he's literally trying to take us off air, literally taking our sponsors. I mean, the equivalent of the Vikings 1,000 years ago in England pulling up and burning a village down. And so there he is, all sweet and liberal and cackling and laughing, but he's really an agent of anti-American totalitarianism. And so he was the front man of that. And I wanted to just simply say,
well, you're right.
I see you. I know what you're doing. So people see it out of context and think, why are you being so mean to him? Well, I mean, he's literally trying to destroy my free speech, take me off air, and put my family on the street. So I'm pissed off at him.
What's interesting is, and I mean, I don't know if you want me to reveal this, but we had dinner in our barn last night and there were some drinks. And after dinner, you and my producer called Stelter on the phone. And what was so, and it was on speaker, so I listened to it. What was so interesting was, you know, you've been very clear in a very direct, pretty masculine way, I would say, about how you feel about Brian Stelter. There's not a lot of confusion about your views on Stelter after clips like that, which doubtless he's seen because he Googles himself compulsively. He was very kind of syrupy sweet with you.
And that's why I was sarcastic and told him I want to date him.
You did, yeah. In fact, the exact line that you had was, Brian, I'm not usually gay, but I want you.
Yeah.
And he seemed a little bit, I'm not saying he's open to it or whatever, but he wasn't shocked by it.
And he's like, give me your phone number. I want to talk to you.
Yeah.
And then he hit your producer up. Please give me his number right now. Let's
that
talk.
was interesting.
But I was being silly with him. But there was also a line. He goes, oh, Alex Jones. I said, I want you to come on my show. And he said, oh, you still got a show? And I went, no, you're the one that doesn't have a show.
Sorry, I shouldn't.
Tell him the other line.
It's so boorish to like recount conversations people weren't witnessing.
It was funny though.
But you said, you're off TV now, but you were a real star. I mean, not on CNN, but on my show. It was so good. Anyway, but what was interesting was if someone had talked about you that way and then called you late night after a couple drinks, you'd say, up yours, pal. You know what I mean? Like buzz off, or I'm not taking your call. But he kind of sucked up to you. That's a very weird, passive-aggressive posture.
Well, I've said a lot of really mean things about him and attacked him. And when I watch the clips out of context, I feel guilty. But he was going around with Oliver Darcy. They would brag on Twitter and literally hitting hundreds of my sponsors. And I say hundreds, I'd have like 20. They'd take them all. I get 20 more, take them all. This went on for years. So you go get a sponsor, you get them, they're doing great. He takes it away from you. And then he brags that him and Dart, I was taken off Twitter, not for the Sandy Hook stuff that came later that they focused on. Look it up. They had the former head of Twitter and the lawyer on Joe Rogan about 4 years ago. And Joe said, why did you ban Alex Jones? The lawyer goes, okay, let me open my clipboard. She goes, here's why. He was mean to Oliver Darcy. So I'm at the Capitol. They're having censorship hearings. Sundar Pichai's there. I just confronted him in the hall.
Who runs Google.
And you guys are welcome to use that if you want. And then that was at the Senate. So now they were going over to a House meeting, and there's Oliver Darcy in the line. He gets to get in. I don't even get into a hearing where they then attacked me. They'd attacked me at the last hearing, but I don't get to face my accuser. And so I get in his face. I don't threaten him, but I say, you are an evil man. You're un-American, coming after my free speech, harassing my sponsors, trying to get me off the internet. And the last place I was on was Twitter. They'd held out. And so Jack Dorsey had held out. And so Jack Dorsey admitted, well, the last straw was I bullied Oliver Darcy. And so that's why I was deplatformed. Elon Musk thinks it was the Sandy Hook thing. And notice.
Do you know that in most cultures, bullying Oliver Darcy would be like a rite of passage? Like you couldn't, like that would be a positive good, right?
Well, but here's the thing. He's literally on Twitter taking my sponsors, calling for me to be silenced. So he's been attacking me, attacking my speech and my living. And then all I do is shove a camera in his face while he's waiting to go into the hearing for 5 minutes and say, man, you are un-American. You got some evil eyes. And I said, you really look like a piece of slime. I mean, I told him that. And,
Fair.
And so the point is, he's a man. He's a, quote, journalist in the arena. He goes around harassing people and stalking them financially and their free speech. He'd already bragged that he'd gotten me taken off all this other stuff and that he was instrumental, which he was. And then he can't take me saying, man, you're a jerk.
Right.
So
this is the classic posture. You know, stop hitting me, he says, as he, you know, fires a gun through your windshield.
Exactly. They can dish it out, but they can't take it.
So what's the effect on you? And I don't mean even the lawsuits against you, and there was an effort to criminally indict you, I guess, just for having bad opinions or whatever.
A bunch of them, actually.
A bunch of them, yeah.
They've had 4 grand juries I've had to respond to, subpoenas. My lawyers,
when you've committed no crime, you're like one of the only people in media who's not ginning up race hatred, I would say, just to be totally clear, because it's very common to do that. You don't do that. So anyway, and then of course this $1 billion judgment against you for having naughty opinions, which is insane. I'm not even talking about that. I just mean, what's it like to spend 25, 30 years connecting the dots and seeing this slow-moving storm come toward the country that you were born in? What effect does that have on you? Since
you use the analogy of a storm, it'd be like if I was 100 years ago before they had radar, and I've read about the famous flood 120-something years ago in Galveston that killed tens of thousands of people.
Oh, yeah, the hurricane, yeah.
Yeah, the hurricane. They didn't know. They didn't have radar, and so they didn't know. But you know, there are the fishermen out there catching shrimp or whatever, and then all of a sudden here comes basically a tidal wave. And if I was one of those fishermen and I knew my children and my wife were on shore at school or work or whatever, and here comes a 40, 50-foot wave I know is about to kill them, I would not be thinking about myself watching this giant wave come in. I'd go, oh my God, my wife and kids are over there. And so it's not that I'm a hero. It's not even a selflessness. I realized that I was just out in front and ahead of some people in understanding this because of family and research and just, you know, things in my life that I saw that encouraged me to get involved in the media because I was aware of the globalists and some things that were going on because my uncle was high level Iran-Contra, had some other family that, you know, worked in clandestine things. So I kind of grew up just around folks that knew what was really going on. And you're a kid, you don't really pay attention to it, but you kind of get that education, even though you don't know you're getting it. And so I've just been out front. So I would liken it to the old days when a dam would break and they didn't have radio to warn people, and the dam breaks and it's 20-foot wave coming down the valley, and you are down below the dam as, you know, let's say a lumberjack, and you know your wife and children are 2 miles down, and you see the dam break and you're about to drown. But I guarantee the last thought you're thinking is, it's going to get my women and children. And that's really, my grief is, this is really draconian. This globalist, Great Reset, New World Order takeover is a post-industrial world, cut off the resources, 90% forced depopulation, breaking